Hello and welcome to What's Next. I'm your host Matt Brading. And as you may have noticed, this week is slightly different. That's because this is our special week. We do it once every 4 weeks and we focus on just one topic that affects film, music and games. This week our topic is a contentious one, 3D. Later on I'll be talking to a lecturer at Staffordshire Uni, James Fair, to find his thoughts on the topic. But first, let's take a quick look at the history of 3D. Now, most people think of 3D as a relatively new technology, but actually the first patent for 3D was way back in 1894. However, it wasn't until the 1920s and the release of The Power of Love that audiences first got a chance to see 3D in action. In the 1950s, a seismic shift happened in Hollywood, TV. Suddenly, movie producers were forced to find new ways to distract people from the magic box in the corner of their living rooms. This led to the first boom in 3D, led by Buona Devil in 1952 and House of Wax in 1953. Those films in fact use the same 3D technology that's used today in IMAX. Alfred Hitchcock became interested in the medium and released Dial M for Murder in 1954. However, by the time the film was ready for release, audience had already lost interest in the subject, and Warner Brothers decided to screen it in 2D instead. In the 1980s, improvement in the technology of 3D allowed a second raft of 3D films to be released. However, these were generally of a lowbrow nature, and movies including Jaws 3D and Amityville 3D were released. This period of cinema put a permanent dent in the reputation of 3D for being a cheap way to attract audiences to the cinema. For the next few years, 3D remained in the domain of cheap films and theme park attractions. But then, in the early noughties, James Cameron, hot off the heels of Titanic, started to develop a camera system with cinematographer Vince Pace. This culminated in the release of Ghosts of the Abyss in 2004, the first film shot and screened in digital 3D. From then on, we all know the story. Cameron took his 3D camera system and made the biggest budget film of all time, Avatar. Despite many criticisms about the story, the success of the film is undeniable. After just 42 days, it became the highest grossing film of all time worldwide. It also won 3 Oscars and was nominated for a further 6. Now, the release of Avatar is one of the main reasons that 3D refuses to go away. First, in order to show the screen, cinemas around the world had to upgrade to digital 3D projectors. Secondly, movie studios find it hard to ignore it when a film becomes the highest grossing film of all times. However, it's not just feature filmmakers benefiting from this technology. Nearly 2 years before the release of Avatar, Reality Digital released U2 3D, which gave audiences a chance to see the band perform in digital 3D. This was the first 3D multi-camera setup used. In fact, it was so ahead of the time that it used every single digital 3D camera in existence. Since this, there have been a raft of other 3D concert movies, including Glee 3D just last year. But the revolution didn't stay inside cinemas long. Soon, TV manufacturers were also offering 3D for people's living rooms. This provided the ideal launchpad for the games industry. Sony updated their PS3 to be 3D compatible in June 2010, and since then a number of games have taken advantage of the technology, including Gran Turismo 5. However, having tried a number of these games, I think the most impressive use of the technology comes from Nvidia and the PC, particularly Battlefield Bad Company 2 and Crysis 2. Of course, one of people's bigger criticisms with 3D is having to wear these silly, bulky glasses. And this is where stereoscopic 3D comes into play, and Nintendo's 3DS. The 3DS is one of the first consumer devices to allow glasses-free 3D. The only major problem being, apart from the re-release of the classic Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time in 3D, there are no really interesting games on the system. The technology used is essentially the same as that in 3D fridge magnets and postcards, but the only problem with it is if you don't look at it at exactly the right angle, the screen just becomes a blurred mess. 3D is no longer just the domain of professionals either. This year, a raft of cameras released by Sony and Panasonic feature 3D video recording capability. And if you want to distribute your 3D film to the world, you can, thanks to YouTube's support for 3D uploads. However, this is when the technology starts to become full circle, because if you want to watch 3D on YouTube, you're going to need the same cardboard glasses that they used in the 1920s. So that's the history of 3D, but the big question is, do we really need it? Well, we now have James Fair in the studio to discuss exactly that. So James, before we get started, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background in filmmaking?
I started the same as most people in the 90s, really, just on cheap consumer digital technology. And then just used to go around filming short stories and then slowly but surely moved towards feature length as the sort of technology improved, and I've tried to kind of keep up with all the technologies as it's gone along and just tried to incorporate them into my filmmaking wherever possible.
Yeah, because you shot a film on the Red One, which is 4K, one of the latest digital technologies prior to the 3D, I guess. Did you see any 3D movies in the sort of latest batch of 3D?
I've seen a few. The first one I think I consciously went to see as a result of it being 3D was Alice in Wonderland, the Tim Burton movie.
Yeah. That one was converted in post-production, though, I think, as opposed to being shot in 3D.
Exactly. It was right on the cusp, and I think that it was just something that they decided they would do in order to help push the marketing with it.
Yeah. So what did you think of the 3D effect itself?
I thought it's the same as a lot of films that I've seen in 3D, really, that it's sort of a bit of a gimmick. It was done in order to push the marketing of it as opposed to improve the storytelling. So I think that it's just been a technology that's been adopted purely as a marketing tool, a bit of a gimmick, getting new people going, a sense of spectacle, as opposed to it really being something that's aiding the filmmaking in any way.
Yeah, we've not seen any really examples where it's been used to tell a story in the same way that, colour when it started was a gimmick, but then it got used to tell the story, and now obviously it's a critical part almost. Yeah,
the one thing I would have loved to have seen in the cinema, and I sort of didn't get the chance to go and see it, was Pina, which I think a lot of people said, they could see the purpose, with the dancing and things within the 3D, but I think, it's kind of very limited as yet as to, what stories should we and can we be telling with this technology, and so a lot of the time we're just replicating what we're doing with 2D, but with a new piece of camera kit.
Because, I know before when the 3D was in an even more gimmicky stage, the main appeal was that sort of stuff came out the screen, and you've seen pictures of audiences with the glasses avoiding stuff. I didn't really like that sort of thing, but I think that's the good thing about the proper feature films, is that they go into depth as opposed to things coming out. So, with films like Avatar, when you've got big landscapes, that actually works quite nicely with it. I guess in drama and comedy, those sort of things where it's just people talking in rooms, can't really provide much to that.
I think it's going to be interesting to see where people choose to take it. I think that we might start seeing stories in relation to physical space, like actually having a lot more impact upon what gets made. But that, at the moment, it's just sort of, it's got an obvious home within sci-fi and things like that. But that it's still got a bit of a gimmicky edge to it, really. Yeah,
most films incorporate it just so they can put it on the poster and have the second screening at £1 more expensive plus the glasses.
Yeah, marketing, just pure out and out marketing.
Yeah, Avatar, I think, is the only film I can think of where it didn't actually say 3D on the poster, but that's because everyone already knew that it was going to be 3D.
Yeah, I think Avatar's a bit of a one-off to some extent to have made that much money without any real stars. It was entirely sold on the basis of its technology, and also James Cameron, the fact that he was back after Titanic. But whether or not we'll see something of that nature again, I think that they did a really good job of opening on so many screens and making such an event and a spectacle out of just Avatar opening, that it was bound to have become the top box office hit of the time.
So have you got any plans to make your own 3D movies?
Not as yet. I think that it's quite interesting, the fact that now it's becoming possible for prosumer people to be able to buy cheaper 3D and see what, I think we might see an explosion of interesting things coming up on YouTube that might lead the way. So I'll keep a close eye on it, but I think at the moment I'm not convinced that it's really wanted by the audience either. So, and as a filmmaker, I'm always kind of interested in what the audience are after, as opposed to what do I want to use as a technology.
Or what do the studios think that people want?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, thanks very much for joining us on the show today.
Thank you.
That's all we have time for this week, but join us next week where we'll be talking about film again. Dan and Zoe are here talking about the Oscars. In the meantime, you can check us out on Facebook and Twitter as usual. And you can also visit our website, and if you want to get involved with the show, go on the website and go onto the Contact Us page. Thanks very much for watching. Goodbye.